Welcome to Brand Talk, another way to talk. We're going to talk about business. We talk about brands that are in the news, your brand. We talk about brands that you use and you love every day. We have a different point of view. There's no yelling, there's no screaming, just good old conversation. It's just so great. It's Brand Talk, another way to talk. See you next week. I'm really excited about it. So welcome everybody. This is our maiden voyage with my new engineer Pedro, and we're trying to learn the language right now. And he's the one that put this very professional intro. And anyway, welcome to Brand Talk, another way to talk. My name is Dr. John Tantillo, or John Tantillo. You can call me either one. It's good when you're having a political discussion to have doctor in front of your name. They don't curse you that way. Not that we're going to talk about politics today, but we're going to talk about something that is really important to all marketers, and that's how to sell. And very, very few people know how to do this. And today we have a real expert in selling. Fortune 500 companies pay this man to give his advice on how to close the deal. And we're going to, and his name, by the way, is Tom Pride. And if the name sounds familiar, you all know that my social media marketing guru, I teach the class in social media. But David Pride, who is my social media marketing guru, he is the guy that keeps me honest. So what he does is he makes sure I'm not making any mistakes. As a matter of fact, I have him instruct my students on how to be a good social media marketing guy. I'm just a professor. What do I know? So anyway, but enough about David. Let me introduce, but I want to do the formal introduction here, and I hope I have my questions the right. Oh, here it is. I have his bio, so I hope he's not getting too antsy. But so my guest today is Tom Pride, and Tom has managed to climb the ranks of the nation's largest uniform company with hard work, talent, and determination. As a global healthcare account manager at this Fortune 500 company, I won't mention the name, his approach to build strong business networks and analyze structural gaps in potential markets to set in motion dynamic and long-lasting growth cycles. That's what this man, Tom Pride, has done. Boosting sales 60% in 1 year. Wow, that's terrific. And securing $13 million in contracts. Tom's numbers never fail to impress. As an equally impressive family man and father, please welcome Tom Pride to Brand Talk. Tom, my God, do you walk on water as well? Do you walk on water as well?
Well, I'm done. Time to go. Couldn't get any better than that.
And I think your brother helped put that together. So
he might have. There's a good chance.
He might have done that. So anyway, and he said to me, please also mention what a great dad and family man he is, because he wouldn't, yes, he's a great salesperson, but he's a great family man as well. And if he's anything like, if you're anything like David is, and your dad is, I get the memo. So, welcome. And I just want to say, I am always in awe of people who are salespeople. And I always like to say is, what marketing is? It's simply sales with a college education.
That's right.
And you put that into practice because you are so successful at it. That's what it really means. But I don't want to talk over you. I want to give you the microphone so that you could talk a little bit about what does sales mean to me.
Sure. So for me, sales is really meeting the customer with what they need. So I think what I tell reps all the time when I'm working out in the field, it's not about what you want the customer to want. It's about what they need. If we can remember that, forget about your commission. I know that sounds crazy. Forget about your paycheck and think about what does the customer need right now. I deal a lot in healthcare, and right now, the last thing they want is a sales pitch. They really want someone to listen, be empathetic, and understand that these are some very serious times that we're living in with the whole COVID outbreak, things like that happening. It's a very serious time, and they need help on certain things, and other things they don't. And so as I've tried to explain to people, we need to forget about what it is we want to sell, and we need to talk about what the customer needs and have conversations and listen.
I couldn't agree with you more. And you sound more like a marketer than you are a salesman. And that's what that's what it's about. It's really responding to customer needs. And I'm just so happy that you say that. And I have a saying, and that's marketing is not about you. It's all about your customer. Right. And probably one of the things I was studying to be a psychologist, and the thing that I was taught in those early days was to listen.
Yeah.
And a salesman, we all want to say 5 will get you 10 will get you 20. The reason why you want to buy from me is because you're going to get the best discount.
That's right. Yeah.
You don't want to do that. You really want to go in there and you want to listen to them. You want to make it about them. It's not about you. Maybe you want to respond to that or make it yours.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that I'm probably one of the, in my personal life, probably one of the worst listeners in the world. And sometimes my wife is amazed at how much I listen to everybody.
We all get up with girlfriends and relationship where, do we have ears?
We're going on 30 years married and still learning how to listen there. With customers, I try to do better. It's a constant battle because we have a lot going on in our minds. I find keeping a pad of paper with me and writing down questions. I don't have the college education that everybody talks about. At a young age, I decided at 21 to get married, settle down, have a kid. He's a great kid. He's a doctor today.
I love it.
Yeah. So he's
that's terrific.
Yeah. Homeschooled by my wife all the way through into high school. Got his master's, now off being a doctor for his first year. So, for us, listening to me has always been a challenge. And I think for most salespeople it is, because we have a million things going on in our mind. But one of the keys that I learned from a business owner in my very first real professional sales job is I noticed a guy named Jerry Robinov, who owned a company called Applicator Sales that I worked for a number of years. And I noticed he was the owner of the company, and he would sit there and constantly be writing on a pad of paper. And I didn't understand what he was doing. And then at the end of the meeting, he would speak. And so once I asked him, like, what are you doing? You own the company. There's all these conversations going on. And at any time you could just say what it's going to be. And that's what it's going to be. And he said, well, Tom, I've learned not to cut people off, and I've learned to listen. And I write on paper my questions. And most of the time, most of my questions get answered before the end of the meeting by people in my team asking the question. And I cross them off as I go. And then the ones that aren't answered, those are the ones that I need to ask. I need to probe deeper. But I've learned if I sit and I'm quiet and I'm writing, it gives me something to do and my mouth's not moving. And then I can hear what the customer is really saying. People aren't listened to today. And so that's why they get frustrated. They're sick of the sales pitch. They're really surprised when you just sit down and say, let me just tell you the truth of what's going on. And sometimes that means your solution will not work for them. But they will always call you back. If you say to them, what you're asking me for, we don't do, or we would not do well, but this is something we would do well. They'll always call you back because everybody else is trying to figure out how to get that sale no matter what happens. And that's just plainly not my role. My father used to teach me. He was a sales rep for many years with a large corporation. And he taught me a long time ago, the only thing you take with you from job to job when you're in sales is your reputation.
Wow.
And that's it. So if you blow that, the person that you're trying to sell uniforms to today, if you mess with them, you come back next week trying to sell windshield wipers for someone else and they will never buy from you. But if you always treated them good and yet the company you work for did them wrong, they'll always come back to you. So it's funny, back then we didn't call it your brand, we just called it your reputation. And it's something that you wanted to protect. And I think there's the same thing. And I've been blessed to work for 2 companies in my career, and neither of them has ever asked me to do something dishonest or I would leave, but they've never asked me to because it's my name on it. And people understand that if something's going bad, I take it personal. I want to fix it. I don't want them going through troubles because I'm the one who showed them the answer. So I really find it, if you start with listening, you'll find out what people are really looking for. And from there, you can build a relationship. But if we're always talking, like I have a penchant for doing, then we can't hear what the real needs are. And we end up without a sale and, more importantly, without a partner, which is really in the healthcare end, what we look for is a partnership, because we're dealing with people's lives. So it's not just selling a bunch of stuff, you know?
Yeah. This is BrandTalkk, and you're listening to Tom Pride, an expert in thoughtful selling and never over-promising. And we're going to go into this for the next 45 minutes, and we're going to learn the importance of keeping your reputation intact. One of the things, Tom, that I like to do when I teach marketing and we get to the chapter in selling is the breaking of the ice. How do you break the ice? And I like to relate this story that was told, that I read somewhere, I guess in a sales book, and it was about this salesman that went to see this same prospect for about 5 years and never got the sale. And the 5th year, what happens? And the reason he never got the sale is he always went to see this prospect at the same time, which was right before lunch. And what he decided to do is do it at 11 o'clock instead of right before lunch. And what happened very serendipitously is a blue jay flew from the tree. You know, it wasn't in New York City. And it came onto the windowsill where this hard-lined prospect was. And he made a comment, this salesman made a comment about the blue jay. And they started to talk about birds.
Right.
Now, this guy would never give him a sale. He called 5 times, the 6th time.
All right.
The guy, the hard line prospect says, "What do you got for me today?"
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
that was the change in the relationship. And the moral of that story is, number one, change it up. Mm-hmm. And don't do everything the same way, because something new and dynamic can happen. I ask you to comment on that story, and how do you see it from a salesperson's point of view?
I think if you're a sales professional, you actually care about the people that you're seeing. I think you care about what's going on in their day. Right now, there's a lot of concern as the world has changed, and maybe this is the new normal, God forbid, but maybe it is. But we need to be cognizant of what's going on in their life. Some people like to share more than others. I think that's part of the importance of learning different personalities and how to relate to people. I've never been a big one about being a chameleon. I don't think if you have to change the way you speak or any of that kind of thing to try to relate to someone. But I think if you truly care about someone, they're going to know that. If you don't, and you're only interested in your wallet, I understand that too, because I've met many salesmen like that, and I don't spend a lot of time with them. But every once in a while, you meet the rare car salesman that will meet my wife when we're looking for a vehicle, and they will say in a funny way to me, hey, since she's the one driving it, let me talk to her. And they'll get to know what she wants. And she's not a super fancy person. She does not care about every bell and whistle and it being the nicest car. It's not. She'll have very simple things. But if the salesman doesn't listen, he'll lose that sale because he's not listening to what the person wants.
That's right.
And I find but you have to care. So if your whole focus is, I've got to build my sales funnel, I got to make a sale today, I'm under the gun, you're no good to the prospect, and you're definitely no good to yourself because they sense that right away. And sometimes we have to know too that when we meet with someone and they say no, I think a very good question to ask in a nice way is that a no for now or a no forever?
Oh, I love that. I love that. That is so good.
And if you're asking them permission, most of the time people will not say no forever. I think I've never heard that. But you'll hear no for now. The kind of luxury of what I've got a lot of different things that I offer. So there's usually something I can find that will help them out. But I've also, the disadvantage to that is I have a lot of things I could be talking about that they don't care about. So even today, as I was talking with customers and prospects, I'm trying to get from them, we're tackling this issue now. What is the next issue you want to tackle? And in the meeting I had today, it was, well, I thought it was going to be this, but now, Tom, it's actually going to be this. And they're so relieved when I will switch gears and let them run that process, and it runs much smoother. When I'm letting the prospect kind of tell me where we're heading to next. And if it's over, it's over. So many times I tell sales reps, you get upset because someone says you're not going to get this deal. Instead, you should thank them because they're not wasting your time and move on to the next one. And when you feel that pressure, it's because your funnel is screwed up. So don't look at the prospect in purchasing that he's a jerk because he won't talk to you or he's told you he's not interested. Realize that's 1 out of a billion. And if your funnel was full, you wouldn't worry about that. You would move on to the next one. That's why I'm always preaching to people, get your 21 to 24 new appointments every week with new prospects and teach them how to do that. Because when you have 21 to 24, you will not worry about the 5 or 6 that blow you off because you're trying to figure out how you're going to get to 24 that week. Mm-hmm. And that guy actually helped you get to the next one.
Right. What do you think about cold calling?
I think it's crucial.
What's that?
I think it's crucial. So what my standard has been with reps for a long time is that if you're doing 5 before 7 and 5 after 5, 5 before 7 in the morning and 5 after 5 in the afternoon, 5 days a week, that's 50 cold calls. Out of those 50 cold calls, if you have any skill at all, you'll probably half of them you'll get appointments with for the future.
I love it.
If not, you'll gather a lot of information that's useful. And I create a little chart for people to use as they go out and do their cold calls so that they could track what happened with the cold call. Did I speak to someone? Did I present? Because a lot of people use cold calls as something that their boss made them do.
Right.
And they don't see it the right way. It's a negative. Did Big Brother wants to know that I'm working and all that garbage. And so they're business card collectors. What I tell people, that's not the goal of every goal of a cold call should be to present. That should be the goal. Now, it doesn't happen all the time, but out of 50 of them, you probably, if you have skill, you'll present to 3 to 5 of them. Right. Now, to the negative person, they say that means 45 people didn't let me present. No, but those 45 people, I'll bet probably 8 to 10 of them, if they say no and I'm not interested, and you're smart enough to say, but could you help me? Do you know of anyone who might be interested? If you've built a little bit of time with them and a little trust with them, they usually will give you the names of other people. And now from the cold call, you're generating referrals. And even though they weren't interested, they may have a friend that is interested. And if you treat them right and you've shown them trust and you've listened to them, I have had people hand me literally, when I worked in Maine, I had a gentleman hand me his Rolodex. and it probably had 200 businesses in it. And he was the guy up in the state of Maine in that town in Windham to talk to. And I signed more business because of that guy. And when I moved to South Carolina, the same thing happened to me in Anderson, South Carolina. I had a welder hand me his Rolodex, and I signed so much business from that, and later signed him. He didn't sign up then. He said he wasn't interested, but he had friends that he thought might be.
Right. Well, let me say this. You're a very charming guy, and I could see why people would want to help you. I mean, I feel like saying, take my Rolodex don't have anybody that would be able to, and that most of those guys have retired and gals. So I wouldn't be able to help you, but that's the kind of, but I normally do that. If there's a youngin that needs a push, I always do the recommending, and I do that with my students as well. So I kind of get this. I want to also talk about a personal experience that I had when I had my business, and I owned a boutique advertising agency, and the problem was, of course, you always had to sell. And the competition was intense. It was really, really, really great, intense. And I had this one older guy that was furloughed from his position, and he asked if he could, set up shop with me, and that he would bring his clients with him. The problem was he could never close the deal. So we had all of these great Fortune 500 companies, but it never happened.
Right.
But he would be able to say, well, I can get this and I can get that. And well, it didn't happen. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about closing.
Sure.
And you alluded to it before, but I'm chopping on you. I shouldn't do that. Go ahead.
No, you're fine.
Close.
You're fine.
Close. Okay.
So this is interesting. So back when I started with the corporation I'm with now, I had got the chance to have a review with a person. I was about probably 9 months in to my new role in a new company. And the information in the file said high activity, low results. That was my review. And I struggled. And so I was coming out of a sales position where I knew people's families, their children. I sold building products to them, and I used to take them to ball games, and I stayed with them and helped them. And I moved into a role where it was selling and then moving on to the next one. And you weren't building long-term relationships like I do now. It was short-term, and move, hand it to service, move to the next one. And that's just the way it worked. And it took me a while to get used to it. So one day I had a director come down and get in my car, and I'll never forget it. And of course, the day that I had the director come was my very first day on the road by myself. And that happened to be the day my sales director chose to be with me. And he had read that file, and I didn't see that till years later. And that's when it kind of all made sense to me. We went to an account, and he said, Tom, I'm going to sit in the car, and you're going to sell this account, and then you're going to come out with a contract. Now, I had never met this account, so I didn't know what I was walking into. And I looked at him and said, listen, how could I know that? I don't even know that I'm going to, I don't know that I'm going to come out. He said, I'm going to sit here and you don't come out until you come out with a signed contract, because you're too good to keep leaving businesses without signed business. And so I went in and I struggled, and I could not get it signed. And so I came out to the car, and he's like, where's the contract? This is like 45 minutes has gone by. I'm like, he wants to see me next week. We're going to follow up next week. He's like, Tom, what is the natural outcome to a sales call? I'm like, well, you set your next appointment, you get to know the person. He's like, no, what is the natural outcome to a sales call? I'm like, well, I get to know the guy, and I set up the next appointment, and then I meet with, he goes, no, Tom, it's a sale.
Could you say that again?
Right.
It's a sales call.
Right. It's not, and that's not a bad thing. Your prospect actually wants to be led, but Tom, you're not being strong enough in a nice way to lead them, and you leave them confused, and then they don't know what they're supposed to do next. So what I learned in that outing, on the very next call, he went in with me. He was pretty much quiet the whole time, and we closed it. And I left, and I actually felt good, and I thought I would feel bad because I would force a person or something. But what I realized was, at the end of the sales call, all I learned to do was say, well, normally what happens now is this. And I got out the paperwork and we signed it. And that's what he had taught me to do. And I thought, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Nobody's going to sign because I tell them to. And I didn't tell them to do anything. I told them that this is what most of the time happens. And that changed my whole outlook on it. And ever since then, I realized that a lot of it's being honest with the prospect, but a lot of it too is being, we call it the challenger sale. I think it's being willing to challenge the prospect and have an honest conversation. But at the end of the day, when you're coming to a close, if you've done your job right and you've done your probing and your questions and all of that, all the things that I teach people, the natural close to a sales call is a sale. And when it's not, don't be rude, but you should be confused. You should wonder, why was I here today? And if the person puts you off 18 times in a row or 6 years, either you're not listening to what they really need, right, or they just like seeing you, and that happens, then fine, take them to coffee on your break, but don't waste your time trying to sell them stuff.
Exactly.
And move on. And again, it comes back to funnel trouble. If your funnel's not full, you will ride the roller coaster of sales your entire life. And so keeping the funnel full is doing all the things that nobody likes doing, but it's what makes you successful, because you constantly have things falling all the time.
Yeah. You're listening to Tom Pride on BrandTalkk, another way to talk. And we're talking about selling, the art and science of selling. And unfortunately, selling has a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. And what we're trying to do here at BrandTalkk is change that around. It's a very, very positive thing. And as I like to say, if it's done right, it's just a wonderful thing. And there's nothing like getting a sale. You just feel so good. I mean, getting the check is don't get me wrong, isn't bad either. But getting that sale and knowing that your hard work and that you listening and responding really does in fact pay off. Wow, there's nothing like it. There's another, I was surrounded by these wonderful sales types in my youth, who used to say two things they used to tell me. Number one, and you alluded to it as well, find out what your clients like and do it with them. Okay, so if it's right, they like to go to restaurants, go to restaurants. If they like golf, they like baseball game, whatever it is. So that's number one. And number two, the corollary to that is we do business with people we enjoy doing business with. Right. And I like you to talk a little bit about those two things. Yeah. And what do you think they're off or on? Or
sure. Well, I think when you build a partnership with a business, if you're part of a solution for them, it should make you feel good, and you should feel fine with what you get paid if you're bringing a true solution. I also think that it's important to know the prospect well enough to know what's important to them. So an example would be that in my current role, as I began to talk with people, I would say, what could I do for you? We've done this sale now. What's something I could do for you that would be good? So we did a lot of different marketing things, squish balls, bottles of water, all these different things. But when I talked to people in the medical field, they said, feed us.
Yes.
That was strange. So I thought, feed them. Why feed them? So as I talked with nurses and doctors, and they would say, listen, here's our life. We get up in the morning. We don't have breakfast because we're putting the kids on the bus. The husband or the wife is heading off to work. We're taking care of them. We skip lunch because we're working as doctors or nurses, crazy hours, especially now. We don't eat lunch. Then everybody wonders why we're crabby at 3 and 4 o'clock. It's because we haven't eaten all day. And then dinner, we go home to eat, and we're making it for the family, or we're just woofing it down. So a big thank you would be feed us.
Wow.
And I've done that now multiple times. And sometimes people question, like, why would you do that? It's what the prospect, it's what they want. It's what means the most. The squish ball doesn't mean anything. They got plenty of stress, but they don't need another little squish ball. They don't need another bottle of water. But when you feed someone, I've heard on your previous one with the piano player or the violin player, I listened to your interview.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah.
What did you folks do? Go out and have meatballs, right? That's what you went and did. And I think breaking bread with people or giving them some sustenance, I think it makes a big difference. I think it's beyond just eating with them, but I also think you learn things about people. So I'm not a big golfer, right? I stink at it. I grew up in Maine. We're not really known for golfing. You lose it in a snowbank, if you know what I'm saying. So, I played soccer like my brother. I played baseball a little bit, all those kind of volleyball. I did all those things. But so would I go golf with a prospect? Absolutely, I would, if they're not serious about it, because they're not going to like me in about 5 holes. They're going to wonder what I'm doing out there. But what I have found is I can have a dinner, as I did earlier this week, with a prospect and learn about them and actually care about what I'm learning about and actually care about the person and not just be surface conversation or shoving a contract in their face, but sitting and talking and learning. And I think that takes you a long way. And getting to know the heartbeat of a person, people understand when you're being sincere. They also understand when you're being what I would call plastic banana and you're just fake. People get that too. And that stuff drives me nuts and it drives me away. I don't want to go on LinkedIn and learn facts about somebody just so I can use it as a weapon to sell something. I want to go on to LinkedIn because I seriously care about, where did you graduate from? What were your interests? If someone gets to know me, they're going to know I was a dad pretty young. I was a father 7 months into marriage. I was a father. So,
wow.
She got pregnant 7 months into marriage. So, my son's 27 and a doctor, and we homeschool. When people learn those things about me, they learn my passions. When they don't care about knowing those things, guess what? I don't share them. I don't really bother with it because this is a surface relationship. So I think getting to know people is really important. What I don't agree with is when people who feel like, there are some people who feel it's bad to use poor language. So they choose not to use poor language. And then they get with the trucker and they're throwing F-bombs around.
Right.
And they don't want to do it, but they do it because that's what the prospect does.
Right.
I've always said, don't sacrifice who you truly are and be that much of a chameleon. You don't need to preach at a person who doesn't speak the way you do, but you don't need to take part. And I've been in plenty of situations, some people like to drink to excess.
Right.
I do not, right? So I don't.
Yeah.
But I can hang with a person who does, and I can be fine.
Yeah.
And that's, I just don't sacrifice, and I don't expect them to sacrifice their morals or their belief system for me.
Yeah. Well, when I was a young man, I got my doctorate, if I may toot my horn, at like 29. And I remember going back to the neighborhood, and I was with the guys, and I came from a very blue collar neighborhood, and to feel part of it, I would throw a few of the F-bombs.
Yeah.
And one of the older, I'll never forget this, Benny. He was such a great guy, and he really, really liked me. He was my father's age, so he was an older guy, and he pushed me aside. And he says, "John, I want to give you some advice. You don't have to put those F-bombs. You don't have to do that."
Right.
He says, "You're a doctor now. You don't have to do that. And if they don't accept you, that's fine. But you don't have to do that." I'm getting goosebumps because he would always, that was our relationship. And I mean, he knew me when I was like a 15-year-old kid. So he saw me grow up. And this guy, Benny, was a bachelor, and he always had, he had a Cadillac convertible, and he always had beautiful women. he was just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful man, and he loved the Yankees as I did. So I mean, we just had so much in. But I'll never forget that, and I'm just so glad what you don't want to be as a salesman. You want to be yourself. To thy own brand be true.
Yep.
To thy own self be true. You don't want to be anything else but that.
Mm-hmm. And I can tell you that, my father passed on a legacy of that, because when I was in this company that I now work for back in Maine, I can remember presenting to a uniform program to a large paper plant back then called SD Warren. And I was presenting, and it was a boardroom of people. And when I got this one guy at the end of the table kept staring at me, he couldn't take his eyes off. And he was just like tracking me, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong. I was like, do I know this guy? And I was young. So I was like, do I know him? And at the end of the presentation, when everybody was leaving, he was the decision maker. He hadn't said anything in the whole meeting, but he walked up to me and he said, "Are you Donnie Pride's son?" And I was like, well, I don't hear my dad called Donnie very often, but I was like, yes. He goes, "We're doing business with you." And I said, "Wow." And he goes, "Well, your father came in here representing Johnson Controls all those years ago, and he's still the person I call." And at that point, my dad was nearing retirement. And when I asked my dad about it, he said, he does. He still calls me, even though I'm not in that job anymore, and I still take care of him. But when you can leave a legacy like that people know your name, and my dad was right. What you take with you from job to job in sales is your integrity to every single job. So don't ever let a company that pays you a ton of money but asks you to lie, do not work for them. Doesn't matter. The pay will not matter. People will remember that you're a liar. But if you always tell the truth, you can always come back to them with more items, more things, and more ideas.
Yeah. Now here's the $64,000 question, and I'm showing my age because you might not even know what the $64,000 question was. That was a show when I was a little boy that I would watch. Are salesmen born, or can you learn it?
I think you can learn the skills, but I also think that everybody is a salesman. If you got married, it doesn't matter to what sex you're a salesman, because if those people really knew us, they never would have done it. Right. So it's a sales job, right? I mean, you talk to anybody who's been married a long time, they'll always say it's a challenge. It's not simple, especially when it lasts 30, 40, 50 years. There are roads you hit, but, so we're salespeople. That's probably the biggest sales deal you ever make is the person you marry. But you were doing it when you were a kid, trying to get a toy in the store, trying to get candy from your parents, trying to eat another cookie. But what I found when I came into an organization where I had what they felt was I had natural skill, and really that skill is, do people like you or not? Are you likable? And I've had sales reps that worked for me that unfortunately, and they weren't trying not to be likable, they just were not. They just were not likable, just the way they handled themselves. And it's a heartbreaker, especially if you've hired them, because now you've got to live with them and they're not bringing any sales in. So that's not a lot of fun. But when you realize, like, man, they cannot be real with people, then they're just in the wrong role. You really need to enjoy people. Everybody, I think, is a salesman, but there are true skills. And what I've always telling people is there is a science behind sales. There is a way to make it predictable. It does not need to be the roller coaster. I hear so many reps say to me, well, sales, it's cyclical. It's up and down, and it's, that never stops. That's baloney. That means you don't know how to run your funnel. How do you tell a bank when you're going to go buy a house and you're a sales rep that, well, maybe this month I'll make the payment, but next month I won't. And maybe this month I'll make the payment on the car, but if sales are down, I might not make it this month. Banks don't like that. You better have a real modicum of what you're going to make and what you're going to do. And it's totally plannable if you fill out your funnel all the time. So your sales funnel is full, but you've got to do the mechanics to make it full. And that doesn't happen. Your phone is not going to ring by itself. So you've got to get the skills down to be able to do the 5 things that I point people to that they need to be doing on a consistent basis in order to keep that funnel full all the time. That's really important. And those are the things that are not fun. But if you think Michael Jordan every day wanted to go out and shoot 1,000 basketballs or whatever it was every day, you didn't want to do that. If you think that, Tiger Woods wanted to drive balls all day long, all the time, now having back trouble and all the rest of it. No, but he wanted to be the best. He wanted to know his craft. whoever it is, race car drivers, they repeat over and over. And so you've got to really get good at doing your role plays, at really getting into what is the sales process going to look like, understanding what you're going to say in a call in the moment. If you have studied it, what we would call phone work, doing your phone work becomes easy if you've studied it. If you know what everybody's going to say before they say it, which is what I teach, it's not a big deal to overcome it. It's when you're caught flat-footed. But if you're making your calls every single day that you need to make, just as my brother does running his business, that gets easy.
Yeah.
You know the script.
Yeah.
I think it's learned.
Yeah. I like to say you got to plan the work and then work the plan. That's what I tell my young students and people that are trying to make their first presentation or whatever it is, their first. That's what you got to do. You have to plan. If you're not planning, things aren't magically going to happen. And by the way, we're talking with Tom Pride, and we're discussing whether or not salespeople are born or made. I'm learning so much here. So one of the things that I try to instill in my students is to take as many sales courses or sales presentation courses, or to learn as much about selling as possible, because that will because I'm of the belief you can always get better at whatever you do. And what does that mean? And I just don't preach that. I also take classes on how to be a better teacher, even though I feel that the people that are giving these classes, I'm a better teacher. Who the heck? I may learn something.
That's right.
And that's the great thing about Toro College, a plug for Toro, is they're always having these what we call professional development courses. And I don't care how good of a salesman you are, things change, like COVID. This has changed. So what do you do differently? I pose this to you.
Sure.
On the COVID situation, and how has it changed since a non-COVID environment?
Sure. So it was interesting. I use LinkedIn a lot. I don't use Facebook a lot or any of that. I don't use Instagram, any of that stuff, but I do use LinkedIn quite a bit, and I use it for business. And so when I looked at a response I saw online from one of the very large hospital systems out there, someone made the comment that he was so tired of people calling during this COVID thing, telling them, hey, I've got what you need. Please call me back. They're getting 80, 100 emails a day from all different sales reps offering them all this stuff that they're running short on. And I kind of spoke into the conversation in LinkedIn and said, listen, folks, the purchasing people right now are working 16, 18, 20-hour days. That's what they're working, especially in where I'm living in the healthcare environment. They don't need you calling them, telling them you got an N95 mask. They really don't. If they needed it, they'd be calling you. Now, if they're not calling you, that's because you didn't do your darn job back before COVID, and they don't know what you carry. Had you been out there hoeing the field and talking to people, they would already know that you offer these things, and they would call you because you did your job back then. But don't try to play catch up now. The other thing is that we've got to get very good at things like what we're doing, where we're working remotely, and we've got to be productive. And some people have taken that to mean, oh, great, I can sit home all day and do my job. And some people are failing horribly doing that, quite frankly, because they've gotten lazy and they're busy, quite frankly, playing with the kids when they should be doing their job. But they're home and it's weird. They don't know how to balance it. You better get focused and get really good at doing your WebEx or doing your Teams meetings or doing your Zoom meetings, whatever your customer is doing. What I found people were doing in the beginning was saying, well, I use WebEx, and they expect their customer to magically figure out WebEx. And the customer says, well, I use Zoom. Well, but I use WebEx, the salesman says. No, man, learn how to do things that they use. Learn how to transfer. And so you make it easier, because this is a weird time. The other thing I've let people know is I'm not going to stay in my home. If you tell me I can come see you, I'm going to come see you. Why? Because nobody else is. Because everybody else is using it as an excuse because they don't want to leave the house in the first place. And now they have a great reason not to. For me, I like the one-on-one, but I also want to be smart. And there's been many meetings. One of the largest deals I signed now, I've still not met the people in person. We have only, and even earlier this week, we've only met on Zoom. But it was one of the largest accounts I sold. It's not the way we wanted to do it, but it's the situation. They said we use Zoom. My company uses Teams. I didn't care. I got the rights to use Zoom, and that's what we've been doing. So I tell people, be flexible. Make sure that you're learning the technology. Get used to your cameras and your mics and all those things. Be professional. Don't be looking like a wingnut out there while you're trying to do your presentations and then use the excuse, well, you know how it is. I don't know how. You're not being a professional. Right. Sit home, do what I did. I had my wife sit in the other room, and I used Zoom. And I was like, I'm going to play with this button. Now I'm going to play with this button. Now talk back to me. Is it echoing? So that you're set up for success and take it serious, because I think a lot of people that get into sales, it's kind of like the last ditch effort. I'm now going to go in sales because I don't know what the heck else to do. Mm-hmm. And so I think I'm just going to wing it. And what I learned was I had some natural skill at selling because people liked me, and I was blessed to be like my father, and I was likable, but I didn't understand the science of sales. And once I understood the science of sales, I could put the two together and understand that the natural process for a sale is to close it. I can remember sitting with a very large account when I was doing building products. Guy's name was Ron Smith. He's probably still up there. Great guy. Custom Built Homes in Maine was his name. He was the largest distributor up there at that point. This is many years ago, 30 years ago probably. I was a brand new sales rep, came off a production floor. I used to have hair almost to my waist, cutting glass all day, and now I was a sales rep with a haircut. I had a family coming, house to buy. I was learning sales. And I sat next to a guy who was my college education, Steve Zerbanopoulos, God bless him. And we sat with this guy, and I was way out of my league. This guy was my age now, probably 50. I was in my 20s, and he was probably my biggest prospect for building products. And he was beating me up. At every price I'd show him, we were high. This company's lower on windows, doors. I had Steve with me, my manager. And Steve stopped the conversation, and he looked across at Ron, and he said, Ron, let's come to an understanding today. You want to get the cheapest price you can, and I want to charge you as much as I can. And somehow today we got to meet in the middle. So can we get to the middle where we both are happy? Or can we not, and we just need to part ways? And I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to lose this whole deal. And you know what? Ron looked across, and he was like, yes, we can work it out. And that ended up being one of my largest accounts up there with that company. And I walked out of kind of amazed, like, wow, what just happened? And you know what it was? It was just being honest. It's just being honest. And if people sense that they can bully you, then they will for all of eternity. And I have sat even a short time ago, and I've sat with prospects that will say, what's your price? How much money are you going to save me? How cheap are you going to be? What, are you going to save me more than this one? And I have looked at certain people, and I've said, hey, what you have now is a Yugo missing a tire on the side of the street. It's rusting. And you want me to come along in a limousine with Chardonnay in the back and pick you up and take you to dinner for the same cost. So here's the good news. You got the cheapest bad program you could possibly have. You couldn't get it any cheaper because you got the cheapest thing going. However, you can't compare that to me, where my program is going to fix the problems and make it a lot better. So let's talk about apples to apples, not apples to oranges. And people usually respect that.
I think that is just so wonderful because you're so honest. You know, I think that just hits the nail right on the head, and that's really what you want to do. If somebody wants to go into selling, what kind of a career path would you recommend they go into? Should they work for a large company? Because in large companies they would get you to be their trainer. Right. What would you recommend they do?
I would say that the biggest thing that has mattered to me is having a really strong culture in the company that you pick, and have it be something that you're interested in. And that may be something that takes a little while for you to figure out. I did building products out of necessity. I didn't know where else to go. I didn't have the college education. So I kind of learned through street smarts. And I was blessed to be able to move from one company to the next that was very honest with its customer base and very above board. And never have I sat in a meeting at either company and have someone blame everything on the customer behind their back. It's always the customer's upset. That's my problem now. I need to fix it. It's not their problem. It's my problem. I think when you look out there, look for a good training system, but some training systems are very twisted and some are very wrong. And I've seen some where they laugh. They took advantage of people. I won't mention industries, but there are industries out there. There are good and bad in every industry. So it doesn't, there's good and bad doctors. There's good and bad lawyers. There's good and bad salespeople.
Right.
I guess what I would say is the world has changed a little bit. So maybe you can't always say if you wouldn't do it in front of your mom and dad, but you can say if you wouldn't do it in front of your grandmother and your grandfather, then don't do it. If it would show up in the paper tomorrow what you did, would you be proud of it? Right. If your company's asking you to do something that's just doesn't seem right, you should be able to go and close the door and talk it over and come to an understanding or come to a parting of the ways. I think the biggest thing is, as you said, pick up all the training that you can, but then put it into practice, because so many people hear so much training and never do anything with it. Put it into practice. Everything that I teach means nothing if you don't take it and do it. And I think that's been the difference in my career is people taught me and I went and did it. I did what they told me to. I don't know how many people I've told. I'm like a robot. You tell me what to do, and if it's legal, honest, and ethical, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
If it shows success.
Well, one of my former students, I won't mention his full name. I'll mention him by James. He was a student of mine at Hofstra University, and he went into a business that was very dry, that was very, I say dry, very boring, and it was insurance. And what he did is he made it exciting.
Yeah.
He made it so he would get baseball tickets. He would take his clients out to great restaurants who were never taken out before. And I should say he's in the casualty business, and he's in business to business. So he would insure funeral homes and businesses he would be involved in. So I'm not talking about a life insurance guy,
right? But
I'm talking about a guy that would have to go and have their business insured. Yeah. And what he would do is, and at one time he did golf, and now of course he had one of those moments that he took the stick and threw them in the pond, and that was the end of that. The point I'm making is that he is the ultimate, not the penultimate, but the ultimate salesman, and made an industry exciting so that people wanted to do business with this guy. Right. Now, it didn't hurt that he was good looking like you. He wasn't like me with the eccentricities. But I guess what I'm basically saying here is that he found a way to break through the clutter and get people to want to do business with him. And you kind of you mentioned that. Do you want to respond to the?
Yeah. Well, I think that here's what I tell people is that there's a couple things you need to understand. If you're going to do sales for a living, it's a mental minefield. It is not physical. It's a mental minefield, and it's on you. And so that's very different. You have to be willing to accept responsibility for your performance. And please don't be the sales rep that makes your boss beg you to understand that your numbers suck. Be the one that understands, as I have in my career when my numbers were bad, that I was the one coming forward saying, I know that, and I'm going to fix it, and I have a plan, and here's what the plan is. I didn't just carp about having a problem. And so what I tell people is, because it's all in your mind, there's a couple things that you should do when you decide to be a salesperson. One is decide what it is that you want out of it. And for everybody, that's different. And if it's a car, that's fine. And it will change, as it probably has for you, John. As life goes on, your dreams change. They become different. Doesn't mean they're better or worse. They just become different. And so what I tell people is, go into your mirror like I did as a young guy and look in that mirror and look yourself in the face and tell yourself what you're going to do. Because unless you're psychotic You can't do that and look yourself in the face and say, this is what I'm going to do. Now, your brain is going to tell you that you're crazy, but keep telling yourself that, and then make that commitment to someone else. And the last thing I tell people to do is we have this wonderful thing called voicemail. People don't use it right. So save yourself a voicemail on your cell phone that only you listen. Don't ever play it for anybody else unless you have a wife like I do who could listen to it and understand it. But play it for yourself in those moments when you want to give up, those moments when you got a bad day and it's going horrible. I'm not telling you to blast this out to the world because they won't understand it. Only you know how to talk to your own mind to get it back in gear. And I've always had these, and it's something that you can always bring back up on your phone in that moment when you want to quit, you're having a bad day, you need encouragement. There's nothing like your own voice yelling at you, telling you, in my case, to pull it together. Get it done, Pride. You know what you're doing. Get it done. Stop whining and crying. And whatever language it takes to get you woke up, use it on that message and keep it.
Right.
And play it back when you need it because it will get you back in shape. Very few people do that. And the mirror works. And once you've got the mirror down, then go to the person you love the most, whether it's your parents when you're young or your wife or husband when you're old or your partner. And you go to them and say, as I did to my wife, my goal was to keep her home so she could be a full-time mom and homeschool our child. That wasn't easy when I was working on a glass line. It got easier when I became a salesperson. But I made that commitment. Once you make that commitment, you have to make it happen. You can't look at your wife and go, I just can't do it. So make those commitments and then encourage yourself and make sure that as you have the negative nannies in your life, and there will be many that say you can't do it, it's not possible. I'm sure, John, many people told you you'll never do a podcast, you'll never be successful, you're too old, you're too young, nobody cares what you think, blah, blah, blah. And you blow them off. And as the good book would say, you brush your feet off on their doorstep and you walk away. And it's okay. Let them go. Because when I came back from training at the company I now work at, I was told by the person that was there and tenured, you'll never be a success here in the state of Maine. And I said, eat my dust. And I never looked back.
Right.
So motivate yourself and then get serious about it. And if this is your career, then learn it. Don't do it winging it by the seat of your pants. Learn why you're saying what you're saying and what you're doing.
Well, you know, what was the line in The Godfather when the guy started to cry and the Godfather said, "You're gonna be a man. You're gonna be a man."
That's right.
Reminds me of the Eddie Cantor line. Everybody's entitled to at least 10 bad years.
That's right.
You know, so I got that. But you know, we only got about another minute left. And is there anything that you want to promote, or is there anything that you want to conclude with?
Yeah, I love to help people out. So if you ever want to reach out to me, you can always reach out to me on my personal email. That's what I use. Maybe that's because I'm an old guy. I'm 50. John will understand someday.
He's good. He's good.
You can always reach me at Tom Pride at MSN, Microsoft Network, MSN.com. And I'm always happy to help. So feel free to email me, talk to me. I do consult and help people. I'm happy to do that too and coach. But it kind of I know I'm not that old, but at this point, I enjoy helping people. If I can bring something of value, great. But I know what works. I've been guilty of not doing what works, and I've been guilty of doing what works. And when I have, there's great success. And it's not because I'm brilliant. There's nothing new in sales. It's all rehashed from Zig Ziglar all the way back to Napoleon Hill and all the rest of them. There's nothing new. Darren Daly or Anthony Robbins or whoever it is you like.
Yeah.
You know, it's all out there. But what we've got to do is go out and study and learn. So if I can help anybody who's listening, I'd be honored to help out. If there's a company that needs assistance with understanding, you can reach me there. And also, if you post up my personal cell phone, I have no problem with people reaching out to me there.
Well, that sounds great. And that's it for today. You've been listening to Tom Pride and John Tantillo, Brand Talk. We'll see you next week, next Thursday at 3:00. Thanks, Tom. It was a pleasure working with you. Thank you.
It was an honor.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Welcome to Brand Talk, another way to talk. We're going to talk about business, We talk about brands that are in the news, your brand. We talk about brands that you use and you love every day. We have a different point of view. There's no yelling, there's no screaming, just